I never expected my quiet life to twist in a single evening. I thought the weekend trip to my boss's countryside house would be just another business visit, a chance to relax for a few hours and escape the city's noise. I drove the old highway, the snow glistening faintly under the soft moonlight, and I felt an odd thrill in the air, something electric and unseen, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I parked outside the large house, its warm lights spilling through the windows, and I could hear faint laughter from inside. My heart beat faster, even though I knew nothing serious should happen. I reminded myself. I stepped through the door and was immediately greeted by the aroma of fresh coffee and baked bread. It was comforting, but it also felt dangerously intimate. I smiled at the staff and made my way toward the living room, where she stood, Evelyn, my boss's wife, older than me by a few years, elegant in a way that made my chest tighten. She wore a soft blue sweater that made her eyes sparkle. Her laugh was low and warm, and I could not stop staring. I had met her before, always polite, always distant, but tonight there was a softness in her expression, a welcoming look that made my stomach twist. I tried to focus on small talk, commenting on the weather and the long drive, but she smiled at me with a knowing gaze that seemed to pierce straight through. The kind of smile that makes you feel both guilty and alive at the same time. I cleared my throat and muttered something about needing coffee, and she nodded, leading me to the kitchen, her movements graceful, careful, like she always knew exactly where to be. I followed silently, my eyes tracing every small detail, from the curve of her shoulders to the gentle lines around her eyes, and I felt a heat that was impossible to hide. I could feel my pulse in my ears, and I cursed myself for feeling so drawn to someone I should only see in passing. She handed me a cup, our fingers brushed, and I felt a spark, an electric jolt that made my stomach flip. I smiled nervously, but she didn't pull away. She just let the moment linger, and I could not tell if it was playful or dangerous. I wanted to speak, to say something that would ease the tension, but all that came out was, you look beautiful tonight, my voice barely above a whisper, my cheeks burning with heat. She tilted her head slightly, surprised. Her lips parted in a soft laugh, the sound ringing in my chest. I wanted to take it back, to say I didn't mean it, but it was too late. The words hung between us, heavy, unshakable, and I could feel the world narrowing to just the two of us. She reached out, lightly touching my arm, and my heart leapt. I tried to steady myself, reminding myself that this was impossible, that crossing this line could ruin everything, but the look in her eyes told me she understood something I didn't, or maybe she did, and it scared me, yet thrilled me. I followed her out to the living room, carrying my coffee like a shield, trying to appear normal, but the small, intimate moments replayed in my mind, the way her hand lingered for a moment longer than it should, the way her smile held secrets I was not supposed to know. I sat down across from her, and we talked about trivial things at first, the city, the drive, mutual friends, but beneath the words, there was tension, electric and raw. I could feel it in every glance, every pause, every unspoken thought. She laughed at a small joke, and I felt it inside me, a pull I had no right to feel, a longing that made me ache. I reminded myself constantly that she was not mine, that I should not feel this, but the more I tried to stop it, the more impossible it became. After a while, the conversation slowed, and silence fell, heavy and warm. I could hear the fire crackling in the hearth, and the quiet rhythm of her breathing. I dared a glance, and she was looking at me, really looking, and my stomach knotted. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. The clock ticked, but it seemed irrelevant. Time had stopped, and the world outside the house ceased to exist. I found myself leaning closer, almost without realizing it, my voice dropping into a whisper. I said again, "You're so beautiful," and this time I could not retreat. There was no hiding the truth of my feelings. She froze, her hand lingering just above mine, hovering, as if unsure whether to close the gap or pull away. I could feel my pulse hammering, my mind screaming that this was madness, yet my heart was convinced it was fate. She opened her mouth, maybe to speak, maybe to laugh, maybe to warn me off, but the words did not come. the moment stretched longer than I thought possible, and I felt my entire world tilt on a new axis. Everything I believed about myself and my life was suddenly uncertain. The warmth of her presence, the quiet intensity of her gaze, made me want to risk everything. Yet I knew the consequences would be severe. The tension in the room was unbearable, electric, and I realized that nothing would ever be the same after this night. And just as I thought I could hold back, she smiled softly, the kind of smile that promised danger and comfort all at once, and my heart leapt with longing and fear. I had never wanted something so badly, and I knew I was already lost. The fire crackled again, and I felt her presence closer than ever, and then, just as I was about to speak again, the door opened behind us, and the sound of her husband's voice called out, breaking the spell, shattering the moment. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest, the warmth evaporating in an instant, and I realized that what just happened could change everything. I had whispered my feelings into the air, into her ear, into a world where it should never belong, and now, the consequences were waiting, silent, patient, ready to strike. The room felt smaller, colder, and I sat back, coffee in hand, pretending nothing had happened. But I knew, deep down, that this night was only the beginning, that the spark had been lit, and there was no going back. The tension lingered, as if the walls themselves had remembered my confession, and I realized that the story of us was only just starting, filled with longing, danger, and a heat I could neither name nor resist. And as I looked at her one last time before standing to greet him, I knew the simple words I had whispered would haunt us both. The fire still glowing, the air thick with unspoken truth. And I had no idea where it would lead. The next morning, I woke with a restless feeling, the memory of last night's moment refusing to leave me. I tried to focus on my work, the spreadsheet on my laptop, the endless emails waiting for answers, but every glance, every sound, made me think of her, Evelyn, the way her eyes had held mine, the warmth of her smile. It was impossible to shake. I kept telling myself it was wrong, that nothing could happen, yet my heart raced at the thought of seeing her again. By the time I arrived in the living room, she was already there, pouring tea, calm and composed, as if nothing had happened. My chest tightened, and I forced a polite smile. She looked up, her eyes softening, acknowledging our shared secret without words. I wanted to speak, to apologize, to tell her I didn't mean to cross the line, but I also wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, to feel that spark again. Instead, I nodded, murmuring a simple, "Good morning," and she returned it. Her voice smooth, careful, and I felt the tension between us like a live wire, unbroken, unspoken, electric. Over breakfast, we talked lightly, about the weather, the schedule for the day, our shared memories of the countryside, but beneath every word, there was something unsaid, a dangerous energy, a pull neither of us could control. I watched the way she moved, the way she laughed at small jokes, the way her fingers brushed the cup as if aware of how close I sat. I wanted to reach across the table, to close the distance, but I held back, fearing the consequences of a single misstep. After breakfast, she asked if I wanted to take a walk in the garden, and I agreed, my heart pounding as we stepped outside, the cold morning air crisp against our faces, the snow sparkling under the sun. Every step we took together felt intimate, charged, our conversation slow, measured, but full of meaning. I could not help but notice how her coat hugged her shoulders, the way her hair caught the light, and I had to remind myself constantly to breathe, to act normal, to pretend this was just a friendly walk. Yet everything about her presence made my heart ache. As we walked along the path lined with bare trees, Evelyn paused to look at a small fountain, the water frozen in ice, and I noticed how she studied it, thoughtful, almost melancholic, and I felt a pang of longing. I wanted to reach out, to say something meaningful, to connect, but the words caught in my throat, and all I could do was look at her. Feeling the weight of my emotions, she turned toward me, smiling faintly, and for a moment, the world shrank to just the two of us, the snow, the cold, the frozen fountain, everything else disappeared. I almost spoke, almost told her how I felt, almost let the moment break the barrier, but then I saw the faint hesitation in her eyes, the careful restraint, and I realized she felt the same pull, the same forbidden attraction, yet neither of us dared cross the line. I wanted to hold her hand, to lean closer, to whisper again that she was beautiful, but I held myself back. Feeling both relief and disappointment, the tension was unbearable, and my mind raced with possibilities, with dangers, with the thrill of something forbidden. After a long silence, we walked back toward the house, and I felt the lingering heat of her presence behind me. It was like a shadow that refused to fade. Inside, the staff were bustling, and I tried to immerse myself in trivial tasks, but every glance toward her made my pulse race. She was speaking softly with someone else, her laughter ringing in the room, and I felt a longing I could not name, the desire to speak to her again, to be near her, to hold on to that dangerous energy. I told myself I should leave, that I needed distance, but something held me, rooted, captive to the spell she had cast. Later, in the afternoon, she came to the study where I was working, carrying a notebook, and I could feel the tension spike as she approached. She asked for my opinion on a few ideas for an event, her tone professional, calm, but there was a softness beneath it, a subtle invitation. I could not resist leaning in, discussing details with her. Every brush of our hands, every close movement, felt electric, my heart threatening to give itself away. I found myself laughing more than I should, speaking more than necessary, and she seemed to match my energy, careful yet intimate. I noticed the way her gaze lingered, how her smile held unspoken meaning. I was lost in the moment, and I could sense she was too, and I feared and thrilled at the thought of what we were both thinking. The hours passed quickly, and suddenly, it was late afternoon, the sky turning pale orange, and I realized the house felt smaller, charged with an intensity one could not explain. We both knew we were dancing around something dangerous, something forbidden, yet neither of us stopped. Our proximity close, our conversations layered with unspoken words. I wanted to tell her everything, my feelings, my longing, but I also feared the consequences. I feared losing control, I feared the truth, yet the pull was irresistible. As she prepared to leave the study, she paused, looking at me with that same soft, knowing gaze. I felt my chest tighten, a lump forming in my throat. I could not move, could not speak. She smiled faintly, and in that smile, I felt the warmth, the danger, the longing, the heartbreak that would follow. She left the room, and I was left staring at the empty space, my heart still racing, the notebook she left behind on the desk a silent reminder of her presence, the words we had shared, the moments too intense for the daylight. I knew that night would change everything, that the delicate balance between us could shatter in a single misstep. The tension was unbearable, yet I could not bring myself to step away. I wanted more, even though I knew it could ruin everything. Later that evening, I found myself in the library, alone, the house quiet except for the soft crackle of the fireplace, and I realized that I was thinking about her constantly. The way she had touched my arm, the warmth of her smile, the softness of her gaze, it was impossible to ignore. I knew that tomorrow, I would see her again, and the thought both thrilled and terrified me. I wondered if she felt the same, if the attraction, the tension, the forbidden pull, lingered in her heart as it did in mine, and I realized that nothing could prepare me for what was coming, that the next day would be filled with danger, longing, and desire, the kind that could consume everything. As the fire burned low, I picked up the notebook she had left behind. Flipping through the pages, seeing her notes, her careful handwriting, and I felt a connection that went beyond words, beyond reason, a pull I could not resist, and I knew, with terrifying certainty, that my life had changed forever. The evening stretched on, and I knew that tonight was only the calm before the storm, the quiet before everything exploded, and I could not stop thinking, imagining, longing, and I realized that tomorrow, we would have to face the truth, the tension, the danger, the irresistible pull that had begun, and I was both ready and terrified for it. The house was quiet, but my mind raced, replaying every glance, every word, every subtle touch, and I knew that the story of us had only just begun, and there was no turning back. The fire flickered one last time, casting shadows across the room, and I knew that the next day would bring everything we were both trying to hide. And I was ready to see if she would feel the same, if she would cross the invisible line. If she would whisper back the truth I longed to hear. The next morning, I woke early, my mind still racing from yesterday. I could not focus on anything, the memory of Evelyn's smile, the warmth in her eyes, the dangerous pull between us, it haunted me. I dressed quickly, trying to steady my hands, telling myself I had to act normal. The house was quiet as I made my way downstairs, and I saw her standing by the window, looking out at the snow-covered garden, her silhouette framed by the pale morning light. I wanted to call her name, to reach out, but I froze, unsure how to begin. She turned, her eyes meeting mine, and I felt the same jolt from the first night, the same impossible longing. She smiled faintly, almost shyly, and I realized she was just as aware of the tension as I was. My chest tightened, and I swallowed hard, trying to form words that would not betray everything I felt. Instead, I said, "Good morning," softly, almost a whisper, and she nodded, the corners of her lips curling. I could not stop staring. She looked so alive, so real, so impossible. I felt the pull again, stronger than ever. I wanted to reach out, to hold her hand, but I restrained myself, and the air between us was thick with unspoken words. The morning passed slowly, each glance, each small gesture, every movement charged with electricity. We were careful, but there was no hiding what simmered beneath the surface. Finally, she asked if I wanted to walk again, and I could not refuse. I followed her outside, the garden glistening under the sun, the snow crunching softly under our feet. I noticed the way her breath made small clouds in the cold air, and my heart twisted with longing. We walked silently for a while, letting the quiet speak, and I realized that words were not needed. The tension, the desire, the unsaid feelings were enough to fill the space between us. She stopped by a small bench, brushing snow off it before sitting down. I hesitated, then joined her, careful to maintain distance, but the proximity made my pulse race. I wanted to lean closer, to speak, to tell her everything, but I held back, savoring the moment, feeling the intensity of what could not yet be. I noticed the way her fingers lingered on the wood, delicate and precise, and I wanted to reach out, to touch, to feel, but I only let my eyes linger, memorizing every detail, the curve of her smile, the warmth in her gaze, the soft way she shifted in the cold. I could not stop thinking of last night, of the whisper, of the spark, and I realized I had already crossed an invisible line, one I could never return from. After a long silence, she spoke, her voice soft, careful, almost trembling. "I feel it too," she said, and my heart skipped a beat. I did not dare speak, I only looked at her, unsure if I had heard right, and she nodded, confirming what I already knew. We were caught, bound by a longing we could not name, yet neither of us moved closer, respecting a boundary we both knew we could not cross. The air was heavy, but the truth had been spoken, and I felt both relief and fear. We sat there, side by side, feeling the cold, feeling the tension, feeling the pull, and I realized that this was a moment we would never forget, that the memory would linger in our hearts, dangerous, beautiful, and impossible. Eventually, we returned to the house, the walls feeling smaller, more intimate, the space charged with the knowledge of what had passed. I noticed how careful she was, yet every movement, every glance, seemed deliberate, like we were both aware of the invisible thread connecting us. That afternoon passed in a haze. We spoke to others, moved around the house, laughed politely, but beneath every gesture was the knowledge, the unspoken understanding, that we were walking on the edge, balancing desire and restraint. I wanted to reach out, to confess more, but I held back, knowing that timing mattered, that one wrong move could ruin everything. As evening approached, she found me in the library, holding the notebook I had been using to distract myself. She smiled softly, walking toward me, and I felt my chest tighten again. I wanted to speak, to tell her everything, but I only held my breath, letting the moment stretch. She leaned slightly closer, her hand brushing mine for just a moment, long enough to send a shiver through me. She whispered, almost too soft to hear, "I can't stop thinking about you." My heart thumped, and I felt a heat rise, but I kept my voice steady, replying only, "Neither can I." And we both froze, aware that we had admitted the truth without crossing the line. The confession was enough, dangerous, thrilling, and terrifying all at once. The fire in the fireplace crackled, casting shadows around us, and I realized that our connection was deeper than fleeting attraction. It was a storm, quietly building, waiting for the right moment to break. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that promised both danger and comfort, and I knew I could not resist her if given the chance. Later, we walked again, this time along the edge of the frozen pond, the ice glinting in the moonlight, the quiet making every word, every glance, every gesture feel monumental. I dared a small step closer, and she did not step back. I felt her warmth, felt the electricity in the air, and I knew that we were on the edge of something neither of us could stop. The night grew colder, yet neither of us noticed, lost in the moment, lost in the tension, the pull, the longing. I whispered again, "I wish this could last forever," and she smiled. Looking down, then up, then back at me, the kind of smile that made my heart ache with longing. We stood there, frozen in time, the world reduced to just the two of us, knowing we could not act, yet unable to step away. Finally, the moment was broken by the sound of voices from the house, a reminder of reality, of boundaries, of the impossible situation we were caught in. We walked back slowly, hearts pounding, eyes meeting briefly, communicating everything without words, the danger, the thrill, the forbidden connection. As I prepared to leave the next day, I felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. We had crossed emotional lines, spoken truths, shared glances, and yet the world outside would never know. Standing at the door, she hugged me lightly, a gesture full of meaning, and I felt everything at once: longing, excitement, sadness, and hope, the kind of hope that comes when you know life is about to change. I whispered once more, "Be safe," and she nodded, her eyes holding mine, promising, warning, tempting. I left the house, my heart racing, knowing that nothing would ever be the same, that our connection had shifted everything, that the story we had begun would continue, quiet, forbidden, dangerous, and full of longing. And as the car drove away, I looked back, seeing her in the window, a figure bathed in firelight and shadow, knowing that no matter the distance, no matter the consequences, she would stay in my heart forever, the pull between us unbroken. And I realized that some connections are too powerful to ignore, too dangerous to fight, and too beautiful to ever let go. I drove into the night, the snow glittering, my mind replaying every moment, every whisper, every glance, and I knew the story was only just beginning, that the tension, the longing, and the unspoken love would follow us, shaping every thought, every breath, every heartbeat, leaving me both terrified and exhilarated, knowing that this forbidden connection, delicate yet intense, had changed everything in my life, forever.